Fury.
It's hard to find somebody that can play accordion is good nowadays. And on chapter 4, this is a boat bigger than the normal. And anybody can show up on the sanctuary. welcome to
the Sanctuary.
It was the Orcades Viking 3, which was a freezer factory ship based for Orkney, well, in Kirkwall in Orkney. The Orcades Viking 3 would first of all have its first maiden voyage in 1991, and it was a pelagic vessel, which meant it was going to be catching herring and mackerel. And it would also have a purse net. And here was one of my dad's treasured cars, a Ford Granada at the time. The skipper of the Orcades Viking 3 would be Angus Sinclair, and the best mate would be Joe Nicholson, which you saw playing the accordion earlier. This was actually the celebration party for all the crew members and their families was all invited to meet each other. Although the boat was actually for Orkney, it would be heading to Denmark and Norway, for it would sell the fish which was frozen on board to the fish factories over there. Inside the boat, it actually had its own freezer factory air, for it would be freezing the fish below 0 degrees, and then the fish would be getting boxed and packaged, and then putting down the hull into the freezing compartment, which you'll notice later on. This was the actual freezer storage area, for the boxes would go right down that chute, and then they would be stored away by one of the crew members. This was Benny in the galley, along with Kim the chef, and guess what? I would get my first big break to join a boat before I'd even left school at 15. I would be washing dishes in the galley along with helping Kim and Benny before I would move on to the box packing and then down into the freezer storage later on. Here is the start of the purse net getting short, for it was basically 3/4 mile long, and it would be shot in a circle. And the reason for that is the skipper would be looking on the sonar, and he'd begin rowing in a circle like a roundabout before hauling the net back up after about 1.5 hours, for hopefully they've caught in some mackerel or herring, and it's a very successful shot of the net. And after a successful shooting of the net here, with the purse net, it would then be pumped aboard into tanks out of the net. And we're speaking about, in total, there might be 8 tanks on board the Orcades Viking 3, but in total you're looking at about 500 tonne that the Orcades Viking 3 could have holded. A lot of the crew was for Orkney, but however there was some that actually was for different places, like my dad and Alan Lobaczewski, which was for Fraserburgh. How they got to berths, well, who knows. And as I mentioned earlier, here's a pump getting ready for pumping the fish out of the net, going to be onto conveyor belts, down into the tanks. And of course, using a pump to pump it aboard onto the hopper and then down into the chutes allows it to go down further into the tanks, ready for preparation, for freezing and then packing, which you're about to notice. Once the box was on the conveyor belt, it would then drop down to the storage for freezing it. The Orcades Viking 3, it was basically a fish factory, and it was quite a biggie in there. I mean, there was a lot of room for every part. There was no space was spared. The herring and mackerel would be specially glazed, and when I say glazed, I didn't mean loads of water on it sprayed. It was like a very neat coating. It would hold the herring and mackerel together, and obviously frozen below 0 degrees, and then it would be passed forward for packing. I remember there being 2 main problems with the banding machine. First problem was usually it would break down quite a bit, for Graham the engineer would have to come and fix it, which would stop the production line going forward. And the other problem was obviously that when that happened, you would have a backlog of fish waiting, and you might be speaking a couple of hours, which was wasted. So it could be quite frustrating sometimes. The packaging was already for identification for whether it was Denmark, Norway, if whoever was buying the fish. Doing in a freezing storage, you'd spend at least 3 hours at a time packing all the boxes away. I wouldn't say it was a fun job because it was quite lonely, and I just remember you was kind of couldn't wait to get out of the storage area after being there 3 hours, especially when you was alone doing it. And here's me, by the way. I personally feel that I've always really had a good work ethic in life, and it was probably through my dad. My dad was the same. The other thing that strikes me when you're working, here's Ricky, which I really got on with. He was just one of brilliant, easygoing guys, always had a laugh with me, treated me with a lot of respect and but sometimes in most workplaces you always get the one idiot that they don't care about you, they don't care about your feelings, emotions, and I've always been brought up to think about other folk and try and treat them with like the same respect as you want to be treated with yourself, and it goes a long way because you always remember if folk it's nice to you, while if folk it's nae, you mind them for the wrong reasons. Obviously, these boxes are getting stored down for the shipment for whether it's Denmark or Norway at a time. But to give an example, it would possibly cost anyway for one of these boxes between £20 and £40 for a box. And you can see how much boxes are already here. I'll let you do the maths when it comes to the full payment. While that was happening, the rest of the crew would then be about to get fed for their meal, whether it's evening or in the afternoon. And while they're enjoying the food, I'd be stuck in a kitchen in a galley along with us other two. Once the Orcades Viking 3 had come into port, it was time to get the fish landed, and they would have done a deal with whatever fish factory or supplier was interested on taking the fish. And the boat itself was so well equipped it even had its own crane to take the fish and dump it on the actual land, wherever it was. Obviously, this would be done repeatedly depending on the amount of catch, but in each pallet you're looking at 80 to 90 boxes in a pallet. And this would go on until maybe 500 tonne was actually landed on the pier. And once the crew had released the forks on either side of the pallet, it would then be a case of the forklift coming to take away each pallet, where it would be taken to fish factory for whatever happens next. Meanwhile, back in the galley, there's always food and dishes ready to be cleaned for the rest of the crew. And I remember leaving in Ireland along with my dad after a pay dispute which affected not just us but the rest of the crew, and I never returned to the fishing industry after this. And this was over in Bergen in Norway, and it was a beautiful place. I just remember houses being like built around the rock areas. It was just, didn't really see it anywhere else. Stunning. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed the Orcades Viking 3, and there will be more boats to come on the Sanctuary.
The Sanctuary.
And next Sunday, I'll be showing you the talents of my aunties and uncles. Until next Sunday, bye.